actually went to Java and learned something. They weren't as popular or accepted by the audience when they tried to do something authentic. But they really are, in some ways, antecedents. But of course, they were stuck in the colonial relationship. And Europe was the center of power. The borders were difficult for those people sometimes to cross without the spiritual permission to access them. And usually the lines went from who was the colonial master in each thing. So the Dutch learned something about Indonesia, the British learned something about India, and so on. There are exceptions, of course. People, sort of the generation before us, their whole Earl de Zoe, Walter Spies, Kira the Queen, Jaap Kunst, Bernard Suryawati, who became an Indonesian citizen after a while, Colin McPhee. Some of these people were involved in establishing programs, usually associated with performance groups and or universities in Europe or the US. So Holt, for example, worked for the CIA and then started the program at Cornell. That was one of the early programs that got a gamma and started things. So there are many people before us, but in this thing, it's a possibility of things. There's more equality crossing the borders. And it was a time after World War II when travel was cheap and general. You start to see the proliferation of anthropology with the possibilities of studying not primitive people, but music, dance, theater, all of those other kinds of things. Please, Ron, come here. Okay. And you start to see funding given by the U.S. government who's fighting a Cold War, and that means that students can get grants to go to these places. Ford Foundation, Rockefeller Foundation, many other things, start investing in Asian things. And we, of course, were not the reason. It was economics and political things that were driving it. But some of us were beneficiaries of those kinds of programs that Fulbright created. So the academic study, people like Nigel Hood down at UCLA, Allegra Fuller-Schneider, who did dance ethnology, started this idea of by musicality or by performance that you could really cross the border, become a dancer, a musician in another tradition. And with students coming out of that program that helped create this, there was a sort of triangular relationship early on between UCLA, Wesleyan University, and Cal Arts. And Bob Brown, who's very important and founded the School of Music Art, had sort of circulated through all those things and ended up, after San Francisco State, down at UC San Diego. So that's where the titular Center for World Music is right now. But in the beginning, it's really Bala Saraswati. In 1962, she came to the U.S. after a wonderful performance in Japan. People were knocked out of the water or whatever, invited her here. And in the audience was Luis and Sanskrit, who then were invited. I asked great quotes from them in a long paper that we don't have time for. I have to share this almost immediately. But Bala Saraswati was first on very soon after that. Ali Akbar Khan was invited to do small workshops. It was the idea of creating the guru, the student-teacher relationship that was the fundamental way of passing the arts within these traditions, that it could be created in a U.S. context and starting this summer program where you could have that intensive relationship, a beginning of understanding that it was not a professor up there lecturing, it was you bringing tea to your professor and listening, as Dina Burton's thesis says, sort of sitting at the feet of the guru and to absorb in that different kind of way what it was. So these are the real founders. This is the vision, Sam Scripps, Louise Scripps. Louise, demonstrated what she knew from the American context of some Queen dance, and Bala said, we need to work on this. And that is why. And at the time, they were located in Oakland. Sam, of course, was from the Scripps newspaper family, and that provided the opportunity and the gift that all of us benefited from for so many years. And in the center, extending that Bala in some of that early transactions. Bob Brown was the guy, sort of the implementation guy, and the grandiose vision impresario, chaos of beauty. And many people have stories about Bob Brown sending them with gamelons 2,000 miles across country, doing this and that. Perhaps some of those come out today. But, and then of course, he did programs in Bali. Some of the people who are here may have participated in those early on, and it was basically Sam and Louise funding it. They made it all happen. It was gamelan. He was the one who got the gamelan, figured who would be the people who assisted in it. So it was a grand vision. Unfortunately, he at one point cut Sam off the board. I have no idea why. Craziness. And that's when it changed things. But we, many of us here, were here that summer, years ago. Bala and her line are important and exist to the present, although her grandson is teaching in India now, and we're just seeing people like Eva here or this afternoon, Angie, have continued that relationship back and forth. But there, the Ali Akbar Khan School of Music began with this program, and then of course moved to Marin and other things. So it was everything. It was Java, it was Bali, there was contemporary music and dance from that earlier period where this is what was going to give new ideas, breath, life, vision to American contemporary dance, the kinds of things that St. Dennis had shown and all of those people were into. We aren't going to talk about all the Korea, the Japanese, the Indian dance. It was not only Indonesia and Bali, those were just the strongest traditions, primarily I think because of Louise's interest in India and Sam's sort of perchance Indonesia. So staff, students, some of them you're going to see here today, sometimes looking much older, or some of the pictures pulled up are the same from right now. But in 1974, they were much younger. So here's one image of Paula's class from back then. People doing the Indian side and singing. Some of the outcomes, artists who taught these things within their own studios, contemporary composers and choreographers, people like Paul Drescher, who's in the other room, setting up in this room, setting everything up, things like that. These are movers and shakers within the world and teaching it, within artistic practice. It went heavily into academia, especially in the UC system. I see some people in the audience from UC Davis or Berkeley or UCSC, Santa Barbara, UCLA. All of those places became hot spots that were affected and very often sent students in the summer to participate in these programs. And it went far beyond that. Southeast Asian studies, linguistics, people who went in to run Fulbright programs, Rockefeller programs, Asia Society programs. It affected that whole thing of producers and people who implemented cross-cultural projects. Filmmakers, Larry Reed, maybe we'll see Eva, who has a wonderful film about recent things. foundations that are friendly to the arts, which, you know, it's not every foundation or things like that. Things like the American Indonesia Friendship Association, which is funding this in part, or the Southeast Asia program at UC Berkeley. The reason that we're here today is they gave some money because of this history that comes from them, came through us in our lives and goes out to our students. So it's the first generation. I think we just did it. And then we tried to describe what it was, you know, and articulate that to our students. Second generation, French theory had hit the academy and other things, so they would do it and they would also theorize it. Henry Spiller writing his dissertation on gender issues, or Andrew Weintraub doing his things about the politics, the New Order, things like that. Third generation right now, if I look at my students, they want to do it, but they're also looking at the borders and all the things of appropriation and, you know, how we Caucasian doing it. There's one more chairs, just pick them up. Have some implications. I'm just going to go. These were three of the gurus. I'm just talking now about the Sundanese program. Other people will cover the other ones. Undan, who is somewhere, yes, yeah, right here. Who is a young, almost teenager, was drumming, and Bob Brown listened and turned and said, "You got to come." This summer of 1974, 1975, when he bought 45 world-class artists to teach over at the Julia Morgan Center, and had Ron Bogley, who's over there, sort of redesign it as an architect so that we could have all these beautiful spaces that lifted the soul to look at. People who made Peggy Day, who made wonderful food, all of these things. I got there because they gave me a grant to come from the East Coast. I just, you know, hitchhiked through Southeast Asia and rode third-class trains in India because I was interested in Commedia dell'arte and saw this living tradition of improvised theater, the articulation of music and performance, all happening at the same time. The things we were trying to create in the 60s were already there. I'm just going to say, I'm going to go through all this because we have too many people who need to speak. But some of the second generation, so I just skipped all of you since many of you are talking. Second generation, they did the practice. This is one component, Rayanne, who will be performing later this afternoon with her husband, Burhan. These groups that go up into community gamelans are focused on making records, doing performance, enjoying it themselves. Suzanne married Panchat Silat martial artist, and that was one of the big beginnings of Panchat Silat in the US and in Europe, where Herman went later. The academic part of the second generation, people like Henry, Andrew Weintraub, Gina Zatone, and Sean Williams. This is just for the Sundanese, which is a really small and minor component compared to Java, Bali, India. The others, and this is the third generation. Ed Garcia, whose wife he will be playing, his wife will be presenting later, or Jay Arms, who's doing teaching Sundanese music at UPitt. But if I look at their dissertations, they're about American so studying this 50-year tradition, or composers who are continuing that tradition from people like Lou Harrison, who was one of our teachers, you know, of the cross-cultural thing. I think it's harder for people to stand in the front row and do Balinese dance, or, you know, even sometimes say, oh, can I really play that, or become an authority in that because of some of the borders. And as we're looking at borders get even tighter and smaller, this wonderful time, the gift that was given to us by the 1960s and 1970s, And even that we knew where Southeast Asia was because of the terrible Southeast Asian and Vietnam War, and that we'd hitchhiked through Afghanistan and Pakistan and Iran, things like that. It was a world much freer, and it was beautiful. I'm going to stop right now. Andy, we're going to put you next just because if anyone's interested in this, I have a paper in my China Seni that has a lot more missing.
Am I okay sitting?
Yeah.
Okay. I have a big voice. I can carry it. I'm a little bit of an outsider here. I think based on this, I'm somewhere between second and third generation, maybe. So I'm going to read something because that's how I roll. So I'm a bit of an outlier here. I didn't go to ASEA or the Center for World Music. But let me give you a little personal background first to tie in the center, the history of Indonesian arts in California, and Gamelan Sekarjaya, of which I'm a member. So I grew up in Cincinnati, Ohio, not exactly a cultural desert, excellent classical Western music there, but not exactly a breeding ground for non-Western arts. I began at a young age to look beyond the traditional musical scene. I went from rock and roll to Motown to the outer edges of jazz and other creative music. Frank Zappa, Lord Buckley, Miles Davis, John Coltrane, Harry Parch, Terry Riley, on and on and on. And finally to the None Such Explorer series, and other music from around the world. One day I wandered into a record store and looking for something new, and came home with a Balinese gamelan album. It was either Music from the Morning of the World or Golden Rain, I can't remember which one, but that was the first. In any event, I was immediately hooked. But where does one go in the Midwest in the early 1970s to hear Balinese gamelan music? My living room to listen to my growing collection of albums was the only place I knew. Fast forward a few years, I managed to get myself admitted to Cal Arts as a graduate theater directing student, where I could also finally begin to satisfy my gamelan Jones. There I met and studied Balinese and Javanese dance with that guy over there, after graduating from Cal Arts in '79, I spent the following summer and fall in San Francisco, where I performed at a workshop at SF State that was co-sponsored by the Center for World Music. I also sat in on what was one of the first, and possibly the first, meetings of what became Gamelan Sekarjaya. Then I left the Bay Area and took a 37-year break from active participation in the Indonesian music scene. And then in 2016, I was back here in the Bay Area, and I walked into Gamelan Sekarjaya, into an angklung rehearsal, and the next thing I knew, I joined the band. I'd never studied the music, I'd only studied the dance. I picked up a pongo for the first time at the age of 62. Then for kicks, I decided to pursue a graduate degree at Johns Hopkins after a law degree and a bunch of other useless degrees. And for my thesis project, I decided to write a history of the founding of Gamelan Sekarjaya. So for any of you who don't know, GSJ was founded in 1979 by Wayan Suecha, Rachel Cooper, and Michael Tanzer. Originally billed as a 6-week intensive workshop in Balinese gamelan, 46 years later, it's an internationally renowned cultural institution and a vital part of the Bay Area's diverse music scene. Based in Berkeley, where it now miraculously owns its own building, GSJ is a membership organization generally consisting of about 50 or so musicians and dancers. We have multiple ensembles, including Agong Kebyar, Angklung, Jago, Gender, Wayan, which perform regularly in the Bay Area and beyond. In '85, GSJ was the first non-Balinese gamelan to perform in Bali. We also offer public classes, teach in the schools, etc. Annually, we bring in master dance and music teachers from Bali. In the 46 years, hundreds of musicians and dancers have studied or performed with us, and gamelans around the country have been founded or seeded by former Sekarjaya members. Balinese composers have composed new works for us, and GSJ has been involved in cross-cultural and mutually enriching exchanges with Balinese artists for decades. In order to research the thesis for my master's degree, I interviewed most of the core group of GSJ's founding members to figure out how and when they became interested in gamelan and how they ended up in the Bay Area, ready, willing, and able to dedicate themselves to forming what became the first community-based gamelan in the U.S., first community-based Balinese gamelan in the U.S. In collecting these individual stories, I began to see the key role that the Center for World Music had played in exposing and training musicians in Balinese music, and also in establishing the Bay Area as the nexus of the Indonesian art scene in the US. During the years that the center had workshops at Mills and later at the Julia Morgan Theater, it brought together an extraordinary group of teachers and students and laid the foundation for a living community of Indonesian arts here. It embedded itself in the cultural ecosystem of the Bay Area and had an immense impact on the ears and eyes and lives of thousands of people. Although GSJ was not a direct outgrowth of the center, I think it's fair to say that, but for the impact and contributions of the center, the necessary conditions would not have been present in the Bay Area for the founding and growth of Sekarjaya. In particular, the formation of Sekarjaya depended on having a core group of dedicated musicians who already had enough gamelan experience to embark on an intensive, open-ended project. The common denominator of the original members was that they were not starting from scratch. While their levels of prior training varied, they all, with one notable exception, could hit the ground running. Several of the original core members of GSJ had studied at the center, and others had come to the Bay Area specifically because of the reputation the Bay Area had developed as the place to be involved in Balinese music, a reputation largely attributable to the center and a reputation it retains to this day, and currently thanks largely to Gamelan Sekarjaya and the networks of connections it has created and fostered. The roots of Balinese music are embedded deeply in the soil of the Bay Area, and those roots have been fed and nurtured for decades by a constantly evolving group of dedicated individuals who share a commitment and love for the work. Thank you.
Okay, so that's to notify you of places you can go to read. What we're now going to do is just personal statements and from people who were involved. So I want to do this by the year you became involved with the Center for World Music. So who is the 1960s here became involved? So Eva, you are on first. And what I'm going to say, we only have until 10:30, unfortunately. So I'm going to ask what?
Till 11:30.
We have until 11:30?
Yeah, 30 more minutes.
Yeah, 30 more minutes. So
I'll be quick.
yeah.
It was 1967, the summer of love. I was 19 years old. I had been working with Norma Leistico on Haight Street, who is a protege of Anna Halprin. I was fertile ground for either going one way or the other. And I said this at Sanskrit's memorial. And I found out that there would be a program on Durant Street at a rented fraternity house. I had already sort of responded to a little note that I had seen. I was in college up here. I had seen on the board of somebody who had studied with Bala in '64. And so I'm grateful to my parents for being the fertile ground for this very deep seed to be planted in that year. So from the age of 4, I had studied with, I had studied musical comedy with Shirley Temple's teacher. We had a family act. I had been privileged to study with Maria Bakefi, who was the first ballerina who had defected from the Bolshoi Ballet. I was a dancer inside of me, and I had danced on American Bandstand. I was very, into all of the rock and roll that was going on. 7 years old, I had a dance party for my birthday. So I was very fertile ground for what was to happen. So Louise Scripps was teaching, and Ali Akbar Khan. It was this incredible gathering of great artists. And I didn't realize it at the time, but Ani Ruda Knight later said to me, the dance has to pick you and you have to pick the dance. And that is what happened to me that year. So after that summer, and we did a recital, and for the recital, Louise brought out music of Bala Saraswati singing. And we got to perform to that music, and that changed my life. And so thereafter, I'm going to say that seed from that moment has grown, and I'm going to say that the rest of my life really came from that time. I think it's the appreciation and the nurturing of great art to really be in the midst of it and to understand as a person what it does to you. And it was also, you know, eventually the next year, 68, Bala came to UCLA, and
Eva, unfortunately,
that's 3 minutes.
the rest of the day, talk to these people.
Oh, yeah, that's it.
They're fabulous
Okay.
lives.
Well, those are my 3
We're
minutes.
only giving them 3
Good,
minutes.
and you can see in my bio that I became quite close as a producer to Lou Harrison, and I now have the Lou Harrison House in Joshua Tree, where I bring great artists, including Wenton, who's been there many times. Okay, thank you. Thank you.
I'll be cutting everyone off.
That's fine.
Who next year, 1967, someone near 1967, 68,
Going.
70, 71, 70. 70. Please go. Excuse me.
Could you introduce, please, excuse me, can you introduce these people that we don't know?
Pamela Awika.
They can
Also,
introduce themselves.
Just look at the programs. Did you get the programs?
Yeah.
We can say our names at the beginning.
Yes. And if I don't, just introduce yourself.
I'm Ron Foley,
Yeah.
and I'm probably the only one in the room who's not a performing artist. I'm a woodworker. So I was brought on board to repair the broken gong stand and remodel the church into a theater and stuff like that, so totally different from the rest of you.
Well, you helped with the Julia Morgan building, though.
That's what I'm saying,
Yeah.
yeah, changed that into, restored it.
Pamela.
Yeah, I would rather stand up.
Yes,
Maybe
absolutely.
be heard better. In 1969, my first husband was killed in Vietnam. I was 19 years old. I was a 19-year-old war widow. And in 1970, I met Ron, and we decided to head out to Southeast Asia and go through Asia. And I particularly wanted to get to Vietnam so I could sort of just see where my first husband had been. He'd been my high school sweetheart, so I just wanted to go and acknowledge him. At that time, it was too political and too hot to get into Vietnam, but on the way we ended up in Indonesia, and that's when we met Undang Sumarna, saw Sundanese dance, and there I was. I mean, it did change my life. I said, this is what I want to do for the rest of my life. And so I went to the Center for World Music, went back to Indonesia to study. I worked with Undang, actually. He looked like he was a little kid. His head barely was above the drums. It was kind of like you could just see his eyes. But when he played, it was like the world thundered, you know. He was amazing. And luckily he was able to come to the United States and teach and be a part of the Center for World Music. And I've watched his children grow up, and he's watched my children grow up, and we've had an incredible connection. On one of my trips to Bandung, I was asked if I could teach English because they were waiting on a teacher from Australia to come. So I said, sure. And I went and started an English class there, and I just kind of kept it in the back of my mind that, wow, this is something I'd really like to do if I don't dance for the rest of my life. This just kind of stayed back there, and I always had like these free exchanges where I'd ask the students, they could ask me anything, and I would answer it honestly, and it was always great questions like, do dogs really ride in cars? I wish I could remember everything because the questions were phenomenal. Or do dogs really get in bed with people? Yeah, my dog slept with me. But that kind of put the seed in my mind about teaching English. And along the way, I married a mariachi from Mexico. We made it for 20 years, had 3 great kids. And since then, I have been teaching English as a second language all over the world. I went to Lombok, Cambodia, China, Taiwan, just many places. And just 10 days ago, I returned from a trip in I was in Colombia, South America, so this really put me on that path.
Thank you very much. We got to 1970, 1971?
70.
70. Oh, please. Jody Dunn.
Oh, I should be on the video.
She was the little kid.
I don't know how to do that. I'll sit where Kathy is. And
I hadn't thought about it.
I started CalArts in 1970 to do poetry and photography and alternative education. I had no plan to do music. Oh, I can talk a little louder. I was 17 and I thought I knew everything, as only 17-year-olds do. And someone took me in the gamelan and I thought, oh, I guess I don't know everything. And then our teachers were, Bob was in Indonesia getting the teachers, and Andy Toth said, I'll give you a lesson. It's like, okay, just the two of us. Demong, okay, follow me, he gives me the mallet. And I was like, oh, I even thought I was musical, maybe I'm not. And I'm trying to play, and all of a sudden I look down, my hand is playing by itself, the right notes. Like the gamelan had just borrowed my hand. And I looked at it, and it was probably the first non-ego-driven moment I'd ever experienced, where it wasn't about me. And I hear a little voice in my head that says, I'm gonna play this music the rest of my life. And so I did, and I went to Bali the next summer and came back and did an anthropology degree to try to make sense of what that had been. And then I got interested in education. It's like, well, how do they teach gamelan that makes it feel so good? Well, I have to figure that out. So I did a master's degree in alternate teaching. And then I started composing because I realized that when we play the gong, our audience has no idea why. It's just, they just hear things ringing. And I felt bad because the more I was able to feel gong, with everyone. So I started composing just to create that experience. In that bright world to which I gong. Right? And then I realized that there's 40 other countries outside of Indonesia where there's gamelan. And in every one of those countries, people have to answer the question, who am I when I bring this into my life? And I got very interested in sharing information with those people. I started the American Gamelan Institute to share information, and eventually the journal Balungan, which is expressly made for artists and scholars to talk to each other. So, is that the timer?
That's
okay. So, yeah. No, that's okay. No, that's kind of my mission is to the world of gamelan, however large that world is, that we could know each other and share and see how people grow in so many different ways, and I'm very grateful. I made a video for YouTube to advertise this with holding a puppet. And I said, 50 years ago, we found these arts and we loved young people and we loved them, we loved studying them. And 50 years later, we still love it.
1971.
No, 70.
Oh, okay. We're going to panelists first, and then we'll have people in the audience. Yeah. Panelists first. Yeah. Renton. Newman Renton.
Where to stand here? My name is Newman Renton. You see? Yes. For long story, you make it so short. Maybe 2.5 minutes. I'm really, feel so grateful and so happy. I'll be able to come here to spread our art of music and ballet and dance to people in the United States and beyond the United States, many different places. I've been gone from South America to Europe to here. Anyway, the history of I came here is based back then, as everybody knows, Dr. Robert Brown, everybody called him Paul. Yeah, so many interpretation of a Bond. Bishop is okay. He's a great man. to me, and also. So he went to, I remember he went to Bali, to Java, to looking for a teacher, and end up in Jogja. So I've been married to my wife, Nani. So he came to ASTI, now it's called EC, Indonesian Arts Institute in Jogja. So and they told me, who are you? You don't know me. Of course, I'm just joking, right? I'm from Bali. Dr. Brown, I said, I'm looking for teachers from Bali. Could you tell me who will be? I took you to Bali. Then I got Pak Chokro. How about Pak Chokro? Okay. Pak Chokro. Oh, okay. So I took you to Bali. We went to Bali together, and we talked to people like Mr. Bandam, everybody, then eventually they asked me to come. So before the big earthquake in Los Angeles, Silmar earthquake 1971. So the CalArt was still at high school in North Hollywood, I remember. So when we got there, the earth still shaking. Play gamelan. So then they moved to CalArt now because the school is just open. And end up I'm here in Berkeley. It's World Music Center in Berkeley. So I remember also I went to Bali with Sam to get the gamelan.
So Winton, unfortunately.
Yes, okay.
Today, we hope
Yeah,
Jody
talk to me later on, okay?
Yeah. Many more things, and if there's anyone
you.
who doesn't have time to talk, Jody is
Yeah,
volunteering.
so I'll be around with my video camera, and anyone who isn't gonna get to talk today, because you're all part of our family.
Yeah, you're all,
Find me and you can talk for as long as you want.
Yes.
okay. 1971, 1972, 1973.
Okay. The title of my next one-man show is Don't Get Me Started. So here I saw a performance of Balinese dance and music at Zellerbach Auditorium in January of 1973. I went out of curiosity. I had heard nothing about Bali, didn't know what to expect. I said to my friend, if this is boring, let's leave in the middle. When I walked out, my brain was completely transformed. I was mesmerized. It was incredible. I had a school at that time, since 1970, teaching physical theater, because I trained in Paris. And I had students come every day, 5 days a week. But I saw this, and I wanted to know more about this culture and I learned other things about Bali, Kecak and whatnot. What culture produces this extraordinary art? So I didn't think of studying anything, but in that fall, August, I went to Bali. And I thought, I'm just going to observe. And then I hear, you know what, you can study masked theater. What? Masked dance? Where? Who? And I ended up at Pak Kaku in Batuan. I lived in Peliatan. I took the Bima down and of course in Bali, there are no weekends. How beautiful. So we studied 7 days a week. I went to Pakakuls for a couple of hours. And after 2 months, he asked me to dance with him because all my training in Paris, I could do all those isolations pretty easily. And I got it, which is great. So I don't have any pictures, but I could show you photos of me dancing in the villages, complete. I danced Penasai with the whole rigmarole. And you have to understand, the excitement of dancing Balinese dance, it's nothing like anything you will ever do in Western dance. And the reason is because in the West, all dance forms, modern and ballet, the dance and the music go on parallel courses. They never touch. But in Bali, the music and the dancer, they're like this. So it's like you're dancing in an erupting volcano. It's just you're being spirited spurted every moment. There's my cue. I
The workshop this afternoon.
Can I just say, I have to go to Hawaii, but
Yeah.
I am from '74. I'm not going to do a story, but the most amazing topeng I remember is Pat Winton and Lenny in 1974. It's still, I'll never forget that topeng.
got a picture
It
of that.
was brilliant. It was so.
This is, I went back in 1978 and studied mask carving, and this is the mask I carved. Thank you.
74, 75. Has everyone on the panel talked? Rachel, what year?
Go ahead. We'll stay chronological.
No, we're doing panel first and then audience members.
Okay. All right. Well,
Because I made you come here.
you came all the way from New York.
Yes.
I just want to say how moving it is to be in this room and with a group of people whose lives, who opened up to being a part of something that was much more than what we previously thought was music or dance.
Yeah.
And I think that inclusivity was what inspired all of the various new transitions that people took on, whether it's Undang's work at Santa Cruz, or your work here, or Paul Drescher. I just think that inspiration is really important. And another part of that was the fact that for many of us, particularly in situations where the time was quite limited, you could only study these forms as in a very cursory way. And what became very powerful was that a group of people, many in this room, really felt that no, this is studying Mozart, this is studying anything you take seriously, you devote your life to. And you know you're never gonna get there, but you're still devoted. So to me, that's the power of what, Center Work for World Music, ASEA, all of these amazing teachers who are in this room. And there was no one group. I mean, that's why people start gamelans in their living room and have the neighbors all complaining. Because you say, I want to do this seriously, because there are teachers who give themselves and say, okay, you guys may not be that good, we have to baby it down, but you can get somewhere. And you see generations of that in terms of the musicality, in terms of the dance aesthetics, and in terms of very real cultural exchange. And I guess thinking about the sorry, I'm not doing exactly what I was told to do, but what I think is important at this moment in our history, living in the United States, is that we take this seriously and we see what that means for a new generation.
Yeah.
And where's my hat? Oh, I think this maybe tells it all. So I'll just say, this in some funny way, this is about speaking truth to power. That's it.
Yes.
Rachel Cooper. I think, have I missed any of our panelists? So now we can open it up to the audience here early on. So
Okay.
apologies to everyone. I keep cutting you off.
I'm Daniel Schmidt, in case you don't know that, and I am the renegade. I have been attacked after giving performances of my music because I dared early on to start building instruments and to start writing music for those instruments, based in Javanese music for the most part. Although my early pieces didn't sound anything like gamelan. For those of you that may have at some point listened to some of my early recordings, the most typical of which is Ghosts
in which I have a 6-part imbal, back and forth like this, 6 parts, all stacked up, traveling around. All the selae and everything are clear, and then it's just like suddenly there are these ringing tones, because I have marked the score so that the players that were playing the imbal would let some tones ring through and not damp them. And so that kind of got me going. And I have I'll cut to the quick because I don't want to take too much time. I have kept continuously teaching. Jody and I started the program at UC Berkeley. I moved on to Sonoma State and then Mills College. I stayed at Mills College until Northeastern destroyed it. I still have a very large aluminum gamelan sword there, and I have Lou Harrison's it's not
C. Darius, C. Madeline.
Yeah. So I've still got my foot in at Mills, but those are not actively being used. Steve Paris, are you here? No, he's somewhere around. Steve Paris has kept that active in a small way. So, one last thing,
Yeah.
I have a current ensemble in a church. And it's a small ensemble of amateurs, and so I've had to change my writing style so that they can play it. So that was good for me. I turned a new corner.
Thank you so much, Dan. Anyone else? I see Chris Cargo here and over there. Do you want to say anything? You were.
I don't want to take the time.
Well, you might have to at least advertise so that
Oh,
everyone
okay.
knows to look at your exhibit.
Yeah, I ended up being the de facto archivist, I guess, a visual archivist,
Yeah.
in that I borrowed negatives from many people 20 years back, and I inherited some negatives of performance from my late friend Karen Nelson after her passing. And so I've mounted a very random selection here of what happened. I happened to find prints of or had digitized, but they give a glimpse into what our experience was, and then also a glimpse into what some of the wonderful performances that we saw. I mean, it's still photography, but you know, maybe if you spend time looking at it, you can see what beautiful artists we were blessed to be informed with. My background actually goes back to the early 70s as well. I ended up, after studying art history in college, I wanted to go to India in particular to see the things I'd studied, but got totally seduced by the performing arts of India, especially of Kerala state. I studied a little bit of Bharatanatyam, but my heart, connected with Kerala. But the other little seed that was dropped in my college thing was it was only 30 seconds long snippet of a Javanese dancer performing at Prambanan, in their big festival, and it was so beautiful and intriguing, so different in every way. And so the thing that I ended up studying in ASEA was the singing for the gamelan of Sindan of Central Javanese. I was lucky to study with Pat Chokro, with Bube, and with Supadmi to begin with, and that's deep inside of me as well. So I don't want to take, but please enjoy some of the photos, and if there are any that you particularly want, I'm here to try to give away some of these prints that I have duplicates of, and
Anyone else? We have 3 minutes left before the next performance.
Sorry, we're here for the Wyong show, but I just want to say, I have a ton of Indonesian artifacts. My parents.
Can you say who you are?
My name is Aaron Sampson, and my father is Alan Sampson. My mother was Susan Sampson. I don't know if any of those names ring a bell. They lived in Indonesia in the late 60s and early 70s. My dad was a professor at Cal. He gave a dissertation on Islam in the Middle East, and he was very involved and lived in Indonesia for 3 or 4 years. He passed away last year. My mom passed away 2 years ago, but we have a whole house full, hundreds of these wayongs, original, from the late 60s, and tapestries, and he was very passionate about the Indonesian culture, both from an art perspective, dance, from a political science perspective, as he was a professor at Cal. And so I brought my kids, 2 of my kids, and to actually see how these wayang go in action today. So there's a performance, I guess, after this. So anyway, it's good to be here.
I hope this event can do
Yeah.
for the next generation, like Rachel pointed out. Anyone else?
Brian Steger. I had studied North Indian music for many years, and in '74 I was visiting someone up north in California, and I was driving down College Avenue, and I saw a Balinese gamelan on the lawn in front of the Center for World Music. I pulled around the corner, got out of the car, ran into my old surfing buddy Richard North.
Oh.
I said, "What's going on?" He said, "Well, it's a school here." He said, "What are you doing?" I said, "I'm in San Diego working in some candle factory." He said, "Stop everything, come up here," and I did. And since then, I'm a musical instrument maker. I live in Mendocino, but I've maintained a good, serious friendship with Richard, and he and I have traveled to Cheerbone many times, and I've spent quite a bit of time with the music and dance there. Anyway, that summer of '74, those, 8 months I was there, that was it, changed my life. And I'm here, and I see friends from 50 years ago. Thank you all.
I invited Rick to come up here from Santa Barbara and
He's
give
busy, yeah.
a free bedroom in my house for the night, but he couldn't make it. So sends his greetings.
He teaches a lot. He's got a great group at his house, and he's at the university, and a real gentleman.
So we're up to the end of our time, but I hope these conversations can continue all day. And if there's anyone who I haven't interviewed already, Jody?
Yeah, no, I just wanted to end by invoking our teachers.
Yes.
Because even though our personal experience is very dear to us and helps us with our own worldview, but without them, this would be nothing. So I'm going to clap for all of our amazing.
Margot that really put this together.
Yes.
Oh, yes, Margot.
This was really a lot of work, and it was wonderful to just show up and be part of it. And so thank you, and thank everybody that was part of the producing of this.
Yeah, as Rachel said, pass it on. Our country needs this so much, and our thinking needs so much the kind of opening of borders that this institution created in our lives. So thank you everyone for coming. Lenny will be doing a big workshop this afternoon or this
We
morning.
went to both of us together.
Yes.
And if you have more to say, just find me later. We'll turn on the camera.
Yeah, and apologies as always for my
I just wanted to say one thing. Bob Brown, who started the ASA program and is he's really the father of this whole thing, I feel like.
Well, I think Sam and Louise and
Sam,
Bob.
yes, but Bob, I remember very distinctly saying something that really struck me, that you cannot hate a people whose music you love.
Yeah. Well, there's maybe a little film that I've made with Bob about the history that I think is going to get shown in here. I don't know.
I think so.
I sent it to Paul. I don't know if he downloaded it, but I interviewed Bob extensively in Bali just the year before he died, and interviewed Sam, interviewed Louise. I've been documenting through video the whole history for a very long time. So I hope it's going to get shown here.
Yeah, I'd love to see it.
Yeah, it's wonderful. It's wonderful. And talk to all these people. The history is in your lives and the future of what is shared is also in your actions, what you've done in the past and what you will continue to do. Thank you, everyone.
I'm gonna go home for a little.